This is Object Permanence, painted in 1986. It was part of the Automp series, so it was part of the Life, Death, Birth, Resurrection, Rebirth series. And this one's actually the Life painting. I always call it the Life painting. All the paintings has multiple titles at the same time. But I wanted it to be a version of the house tree person test, which is the psychological test they give to children when they're young to see what their relationship with their family is. In a house tree person test for a child, if they drew the house really big, it would be some statement about their relationship to the world. If they drew the father really big and menacing, it would tell you a lot about what the kid's relationship with the father. If the mother's really cowering. This is my grown-up adult version of the house tree person test. So you have the house, and you have actually two trees. You have a magnolia over there peeking in, and you have this little maple that's just been planted, a Japanese maple. And then you have the people. The people are my family. So my son Emmanuel, and my son Will, and then the wife, and then self-portrait. Self-portrait is a black man, and then the baby that was still in the cooker when I did the painting. Elliot was still inside. We didn't know if he was a boy or a girl, but he's holding these little bubbles. Just talks about the fragility of life. You know, he's pulling these bubbles, and they could be popping as they blow in the wind. The bubbles came from a painting by Harvey Dinnerstein, who was a painter in New York, and who's still alive, I believe. And he had done a painting called The Parade, which was a fantastic painting. There weren't many people, what you don't understand is there weren't many people painting large representational figurative paintings at this period in time, in 1986. There were a few realists, Pearlstein and that kind of Beale, and a few painters like that in the New York School, but otherwise there weren't photorealistic or that weren't sort of cynical and commenting back on art, whereas mine was a more earnest kind of approach, which I really responded to Harvey Dinnerstein in his paintings. He did a lot of paintings about ethnicity and about his Jewish heritage. So my paintings were in that vein. So when I was young, I went up to New York, to Brooklyn, and spent some time with him. And he spent a whole day with me, a very nice man, spent a whole day with me going over his paintings. And the painting, The Parade, was in his dining room at the time. That is a reference to that painting. This woman, I was working on the painting when I saw Blue Velvet by David Lynch. And there's a scene of Isabella Rossellini standing in the yard. She's actually nude, but she's standing in the yard after this horrific thing has happened. And so that scene, like that seared into my, I only wanted to have 5 figures in the painting. I wasn't gonna have the wife figure. I actually had my father over here. You can see his head. My father was walking off stage right. And but then after I saw that wonderful Isabella Rossellini scene, which just seared in my brain, I went back to the studio and painted him out and started painting her in. But you see that she's got either laundry, like, you know, she's either going to do the laundry, or she's got a bundle of maybe where there's a child here, and she's pregnant. My friend Mark House, this was a self-portrait. It was a real self-portrait. I'd been working on it, the painting, for quite a while, and I was standing there shirtless and, you know, looking sort of buff and 30-ish. And then I realized that it just wasn't working tonally. There wasn't this relationships that I wanted, and there wasn't, the energy wasn't right. So my friend Mark House was actually doing some work on my studio. He was putting a skylight in, and I saw him up there one day, and I was like, that'll fix it. So I asked him to pose, and so he posed for it. So I turned that self-portrait into his complexion and into my friend Mark. I think there's a sense of like the Wizard of Oz. Wizard of Oz was an extremely influential film on me as a child, and so there's a sense that something like a twister's coming. I was working on a study of, it's actually my childhood home. I flipped it because I didn't want it to mirror it exactly. I wanted the apex on the left. I was working on a study of it out in my yard in front of the house when my son Will came up to the window of the house and yelled that there was a telephone call for me, saying, "Dad, the phone's for you." When he did this, pressed up against the window to call my name, I was like, I love that, you know, hold that. And I got my little camera. I think back then we had little Minolta cameras. We didn't have iPhones. And so like I snapped a picture of him and used that for that. But he's calling out to me like symbolic of the house itself. The house is calling out. It's saying, help me. There's not really a way into the house. There's a door, but there's not really a doorknob, and there's steps. Like, I don't know where the steps are. There's not really a way into the house. It's sort of sealed off and it's sort of dark in there. It's like a dream, like a strange dream. This is actually Conshohocken, which was where I lived outside of Philadelphia. So I mean, I actually used the landscape there of the reality. And this side doesn't match it at all. On this side, you see a desert. And that's from a dream that I had when I was a little tiny boy. I must have been 3 or 4, when I had a dream about being down in Florida, and in the parking lot, you see a parking lot there. You see the parking lot with the like painted lines? There was a parking lot, and then across the parking lot was a beach, which actually turned into the ocean, which turned into a desert, which rolled over these hills. And when I was a little kid, I had to cross that desert. And so when I was figuring out what was going to go on either side of this house, I remembered that dream, which I was really tiny, and I wound up putting it in there to remind me of that. The piece of a swing, which came in and then went back out later, that was where once I had one of those petit mal seizures when I was on a swing. I got dizzy spinning on a swing, and so I put it there to remind me of that whole experience. So they're very personal experiences that are in the paintings that are just there to remind me as I'm working on it, the fullness of life. I learned to swim once I was a little kid, and I was going around the edge of the swimming pool with a moon pie. I was eating a moon pie, which was, a moon pie is, we've got marshmallow in the middle and chocolate and like a graham cracker thing. So I was going around the pool and I fell in. I couldn't swim yet. We'd moved there when I was 2 and a half, so I was just 3. The parents were playing blind man's bluff in the pool. And so, you know, half of them had their eyes closed and they were like playing around. So at first they didn't notice me. And so they were too busy. And so I fell in and came up paddling with my moon pies, 2 halves of moon pie. And instead of like freaking out, I mean, whoever was there, as my parents and their friends were amazing. They said, very quickly, they said, he can swim. And they picked me up and put me on the side of the pool. Instead of saying, he's drowning, which was also true, you know, they were quick to say, he can swim, because I was up on top. And so from that moment on, in my mind, I could swim. So I jumped back in and I just swam. So I learned to swim in that moment, holding these moon pies. So when my son Emmanuel was little and he was afraid to jump in the pool and afraid to swim, I gave him moon pies to jump in the pool with, to swim with. So this was him actually holding the moon pies, like as a trophy almost of being able to swim at this house, because the pool was behind the house.